Happy Friday, sisters. Welcome back to Come Sis with Me, the podcast, a movement fueled by the heart of women with a desire to experience genuine community that uplifts, empowers, and strengthens one another on one common ground, sisterhood. I am your host, Nia. And on this podcast, we typically talk about the sisterhood between women who are of no blood or legal relation to one another. But today I want to add in that factor. The sibling factor is what I call it, because I don't know what it's like for you, but for me, it plays or has played a role in how I sister other women. So I'll start here. I'm the oldest sister to 4 biological siblings, while being the middle sibling to a host of legal and step siblings. And what that means is I have sisters and brothers of all dynamics, either, and they were all chosen by the adults, and the parents are given to me by the adult and parents that were responsible for me. Okay. And this sounds like a weird dynamic, but it wasn't until I was an adult and had to explain all of these different connections that I realized that this may somewhat be out of the norm. However, when I grew up with these siblings happy and healthy, at least based on what I knew health was. And I love them all the same. We have every one of us had our own different connection and our own different relationship with one another, and it worked. At least from a childhood perspective. But the sibling relationship is important, and friends come and go, but essentially you're stuck with your siblings. And those aren't my words. Those come from Psychology Today, who defines one of the main characteristics of a sibling relationship as one that is completely involuntary in nature. And that basically means what I said before, that someone or something else made it occur, aka your parents or your adults, right? So my parents gave me 4 biological siblings and step siblings, and the adults that were responsible for me in my life gave me a host of legal siblings through adoption and fostering. So that's kind of the backstory in a nutshell. But why I'm sharing it today is because there are some characteristics of the sibling relationship that are important to recognize in the relationships that you have outside of your siblings. So it's not just me that is finding this phenomenon a thing, but scientifically, there have been studies done that prove how the sibling relationship affects the mental and the emotional and maybe somewhat the spiritual health of a person. And the 3 main characteristics that I found as a part of the sibling relationship really hit home for me and made me realize that there are a lot of things that I did learn in my relationship with my siblings that I've taken either unconsciously or consciously into my relationships with other women. And sometimes it's been good and sometimes it's been not so good. But siblings can be an important source of support and love and compassion very early on, or even throughout someone's lifespan. So growing up, like that frequent contact and sharing of history provides siblings with like this close knowledge of each other's like quirks and worries and joys. And I can say in my specific encounters with my siblings that knowing how they have reacted to things in the past has taught me how to respond to them in the present, which is definitely something that I've learned how to do in my relationships with other women. I've taken the experiences and put them all together and came up with, okay, I know such and such doesn't like when that happens, so they may need a little bit more space, X, Y, and Z, right? Sometimes a person's greatest moments of happiness and laughter have been shared with their siblings, right? So sibling relationships can be the basis for extreme happiness, but it also can be the space where frustration and anger takes place the most. And that is why I've called it the sibling factor today, because I have experienced a lot of turmoil and frustration and anger in my relationships with my siblings. And the extensive familiarity that I have with my siblings and that they have with me has, in some situations, caused tension and even like the use of aggressive behaviors that typically you would not see in me or in them in the other relationships that they have outside of me, their sibling, and or their parents, our parents, and myself, right? You wouldn't see this necessarily in my friendships or even when I am with my parents, because it's something that has occurred as a result of the familiarity between myself and my siblings. I'll give you this though. Sibling relationships are the essential place where I and others typically develop their thinking and their relationship skills. Now, sometimes the thinking and relationship skills aren't so healthy, which is why the relationships in your life, specifically those with other women, have not been healthy. There's those three characteristics that I just kind of shared but didn't give you names for. I'll give you names for them now. Involuntary means like you didn't choose them. This is the three characteristics of sibling relationships. You did not choose them. They were totally chosen for you. There's a consistent contact, just because either you grew up in the same home or your siblings, right? So you probably share the same parents or the same vicinity of household, or you at least share other siblings or family, right? So you're going to see each other, you're going to hear about each other. There's going to be a level of contact that you typically don't have a choice about. It's just the nature of it. And then that emotional intensity that comes with a sibling relationship, whether it's a good, bad, or indifferent, there's a level of emotions, the intense emotions that take place in those relationships. And it's an ideal spot to explore and learn learn thinking and interpersonal skills, because you're kind of forced into it. You have no other choice but to interact with these humans that you didn't choose. So siblings they frequently teach each other during those consistent contacts, like that daily interaction. I remember growing up with my siblings, and we used to get in trouble for not cleaning up certain things. And so we would bond over the cleaning and the putting away of things, or either just being upset because we were told what to do, or being upset because some of our younger siblings didn't have the same responsibility and didn't get the same backlash as we did. So those interactions, those thinking and interpersonal skills, we learned how to bond over similar things that we were going through. And older siblings are most likely the ones that are in this role of learning how to interact with one another earlier on. And so they kind of take on this role of teaching the younger siblings, and they can switch between teacher and student kind of pretty well. Yeah. So, but what's surprising to me, where I'm trying to go to is, surprisingly, or maybe not, maybe it's not really surprising, but according to studies, the happiest and strongest sibling bonds are the ones between girls, specifically two girls, but girls, right? In 2010, Brigham Young University conducted a study of 395 families and found that having a sister positively influenced a young person's life. So I don't find this a coincidence, but what I do see is how influenced I have been in my relationships with other women based on the interactions that I have or had with my female siblings, with my sisters. And I'll start here. Being the oldest in the dynamic of my three biological sisters, and then adding on the the legal and so like adopted and foster sisters, which FYI, we didn't call each other that growing up. We were just sisters. I don't ever remember introducing my older sister as like, this is my foster sister. And I actually don't think people knew until we were older and they started asking questions and started realizing that we all had different moms and dads. They were like, wait, how are y'all sisters again? But those encounters with those female siblings have absolutely played a role in how I sister women now. So a couple things that I've recognized is how to be a sister and not a mom, which I talked about before in previous episodes. But I learned my role in each battle from the different encounters that I had with each one of my sisters. I learned very recently that, well, in the last couple of years, that a lot of the turmoil and sometimes blow ups that my younger sisters would have with me was because they were looking for maybe acceptance or maybe just to be heard. And I was giving them, no, I don't want you to be hurt. So I was giving them mom instead of big sister. And learning my role in each one of those quote unquote battles has been, I mean, astronomical in the effects that it's had on my relationship with them now. I've also learned in my relationships with my sisters how I want to be treated and heard, especially during disagreements. So when I go into relationships with other sisters, I can appropriately assess what is happening and then effectively communicate how I would like to be treated and how I would like to be heard in that situation, because I know what it looks like for me and feels like for me when I'm not heard and when I'm not treated. One of my biggest things in disagreements is forgiveness and just apologizing. And I have come to a place where it's easier for me to just say, I'm sorry, because in the past it hasn't been. And also, I have had a hard time getting over disagreements when my sisters, who know they were wrong in some circumstances, just neglect to say I'm sorry. And that it's hurtful. It's extremely hurtful. But I recognize that in my relationships with other women, that this is going to be a crucial aspect of that relationship with them, between us, is that I need to know that I can forgive you, or that you are, that you are able to say I'm sorry. And then not in all cases do you need an apology. This is just saying, for me, I appreciate apologies. It helps me move. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this commercial. I think it's hilarious, and it's actually a good explanation or example of what I'm talking about. Is there's a commercial where the guy is, or the woman is yelling at her husband, and her husband stops and says thank you, and she's just like, oh, and like the whole dynamic changes, and then they just go back to this happy, loving couple. And it's the same thing that happens to me when someone says sorry. When they're like, I'm sorry, I'm like, oh, they really love me. It's just this, I don't know. It unlocks something, this grace in me, and all is forgiven, and we just move on. Now, not all disagreements will be like that, but for me, it does, right? I've learned with the sibling factor how to give space and time. Like reading the room and keeping my mouth shut has has been the biggest blessing that I think God has taught me through the relationship with my siblings, that I now carry into relationships with other women, right? Giving space and time for women, for other females to have their moment, right? Or to just feel it out, what they're going through, what is happening, what's happening between us, and reading the room, recognizing that I probably don't need to say what I want to say right now. So I'm just going to wait, either until it's the right moment, or I'm just not going to say it, right? I'm just going to keep my mouth shut, because right now, this is probably not going to make our situation or their situation better. Man, I really wish I knew that like 10 years ago with my siblings, because I've had some major blow ups with them simply because I just didn't give them space and time to be who they were, right? And now that I know that, it's much easier for me to have this loving, caring, kind relationship with them that I desire. Another thing that I've learned is allowing everyone to just be who they're going to be, right? Like, I don't have to be the one who changes them. I don't have to be this knight in shining armor to come in and save the day. I don't have to be big sis or sis that is like the rescuer or, throwing this thing. Because to be honest with you, that's one of the things that I believe my sisters like really dislike the most about how I have encountered them before, is that I've tried to come in and be savior instead of just come in and be sister. Again, this goes back to one of my first points, is that I've learned my role in each battle, and that has been essential to how I sister with them. It also has allowed me to apply the appropriate boundaries so I can be available in the way that they need and that I desire to be, that kind of fits my margin. It's not outside of my means and my norms, and my values. And it's still giving them what they essentially need in that moment. And instead of allowing myself to be kind of tossed around in the waves of mess that can happen in sibling relationships, I just ask God how to be a better sister and how to become part of the process and not part of the problem. I remember having like this prayer session with God about how to fix a relationship between me and one of my siblings. And I remember vividly, like the picture that he gave me was when Jesus of Nazareth went back to his hometown, and he couldn't perform miracles there because everyone was just like, isn't that Joseph's son? Like I call it the baby Jesus phenomenon, because it's like these people grew up with you. They know little Mia. They know Mia who was fighting all the time, right? They knew Mia who was like rebellious, and they knew Mia who was funny and really didn't take that many things seriously, right? Goofy and but still really smart and got good grades. And they know that Mia who was a performer and excelling in different things. And so it was hard for them to see grown up Mia, who has degrees and essentially education and experience in mental health, come in and say, hey, this isn't healthy. Let me express this. Let me help you with this. Let me give you a new way to process this instead of dealing through this problem. Well, that did not work. They were like, no, you are little Mia. I know little Mia. Where's the parts of little Mia that I need in this scenario? And leaving that prayer session was so enlightening, because from that, I recognized that my siblings grew up with me. They know things about me that no one else knows. And it is hard for them to see this adult, grown up, healthier version of themselves, of you. And so instead of you creating a problem by trying to force them to see this, why don't you just become part of the process and allow them to come into this place on their own? Woo! Blew my mind, right? Jesus left Nazareth and was like, well, can't perform any miracles here. But that didn't mean that the people of Nazareth didn't eventually come around. His brothers became some of his biggest supporters later on. They have books in the Bible, right, that they wrote and were like, I'm a servant to Jesus, right? They turned into, not saying that I'm Jesus or that my siblings were turned into servants. Let's just clear that up right now. But his influence was greater when he left and allowed them to grow with the process instead of staying there and becoming part of the problem or becoming more of a problem, right? So here's what I want you to take away from today. I don't want you to discount or be discouraged by the sibling factor in your life. Many times I've allowed myself to discount this calling and this qualification that I have on sisterhood and building and growing and encouraging the bond between women because I've struggled doing that in my relationships with my biological and legal sisters, right? That turmoil that I had between us and them carried over, and it discouraged me in thinking that I could be any sort of fresh breath or fresh light on a relationship between women. And that's just not true, right? If anything, it has given me a deeper appreciation for the women who I am coming in contact with. If anything, it has given me a deeper appreciation of my sisters and the roles that they have played in my life. And at times, I feel like I potentially could have said that more, but I pray now that the things that I'm doing, the way that I'm treating and interacting with them and interacting with other women will just continue to grow that bond between us. And so I don't want you to be discouraged or distracted by the sibling factor. That is something that you did not choose, right? But I want you to take what you're learning in those relationships and apply them to other relationships in your life, because that's essentially what they're for, right? You have been given, if you have siblings, it is a blessing. Whether you have a good relationship or a bad relationship with them, it's a blessing because those are the first relationships that God gave you to learn how to interact, to learn how to be personal and interpersonal with yourself and with others. And so based on those interactions, I want you to take from those lessons to become part of the process and not part of the problem. Thank you guys. Again, I've been getting more subscriptions to Come Sis with me. And again, as a podcaster, I know having you as a listener is invaluable. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being a part of my process. And thank you for sending in your ratings and your reviews. Thank you for listening on all different podcasts and platforms, all different podcasts, all different platforms, and just going through the simple steps with me. I just appreciate it. And I love you. That's it for this Friday. So I'll catch you guys next week. Same place, same time, maybe. And if you don't already know, you got this, sis. Have a good one, guys. Love you.